Did you know that the Jedi were not always corrupt? Apparently, in the days of old, roughly like 36,000 years or so before the events of A New Hope, the Jedi and the Sith were part of the same order. An order not dedicated to the study of Ashla and Bogan. The order was in fact dedicated to the complete mastery and understanding of the Force as a whole. While this order of Jedi were good and honorable, they were also really good at violence. Like, really, really good at it. They were counted among the fiercest of warriors that the galaxy had to offer even before the invention of the lightsaber. They were armament hockeying up their regular ass metal swords and then cutting through everything with them. Some of these masters of old didn't even use weapons. No, not because she was like a pacifist or anything. No. She just had these hands, and they were rated E for everybody. This order understood that the universe is a dangerous place, and while being kind and generous is good and all, sometimes violence is the answer. Sometimes you gotta put a dude down. Sometimes the Senate trials are not necessary. So definitely subscribe, like this video, comment your favorite part, and let's get into this, shall we? This is the Stupendous Wave on YouTube. He did a video covering the complete timeline of the ancient Jedi Order, and we are going to find out what he had to say about these things. This is quite a long video, and it's going to be one of the longer form videos on my channel. Definitely subscribe to me as well. Let's go.
The Jedi Order, the light of the galaxy. For tens of thousands of years, the Jedi Knights have been the guardians of peace and justice in the Republic. This was their identity for as long as anyone can remember. Their hope and guidance.
Yeah, until they were fucking corrupted by politics.
And led the galaxy into periods of unparalleled peace, often at the cost of balance within their very own order. But rest assured, anytime the Republic needed their help, the Jedi...
See, look, okay, the problem with the modern day Jedi is that they were champions of justice, so to speak, right? They weren't actually seeking balance in the Force. They weren't seeking to understand the Force the way that they were supposed to be, and the way that they were masquerading that they were doing, right? What they were was a police force for the fucking galaxy, and that's never what the Jedi were supposed to be, but that's what they were being used for. They were the cudgels for the Senate. That's what they were. That's why Palpatine's plan worked so damn well.
were always there.
Hi, Stormy. How are you? We're covering Star Wars today because may the 4th be with you.
To answer, all innocence would be protected, all wrongs righted, and all injustices avenged. They were the watchful sentinels of the galactic civilization and the keepers of peace. But there was a time before the Jedi stood guard for the Galactic Republic. There was a time long ago when they were
a time when things made sense.
Humble monks on a quest to discover the true meaning of the Force.
I don't remember who said it, but I've covered lots of Star Wars lore, not like on streams and stuff, but like I know what Star Wars is. I've looked into it. I love Star Wars. I'm a big fucking nerd. So I don't remember who said it, but somebody that was from like the days of the Old Republic was talking to somebody that's from the newer age of the Jedi Order, and she literally said, I'm pretty sure it was a girl. She literally said, the Jedi of now are but children playing with sticks compared to the masters of old. Like, that is to just illustrate the difference in power and in skill that these people had. The older Jedi Order was likely magnitudes more powerful than Yoda's fucking Jedi Order was.
Its greater mystery. Before they were ever warriors, before they ever...
Put it simply, if Anakin Skywalker, even before turning Vader, were to go back to the days of the Old Republic, he would be relatively mid.
Or solely served the light.
Like low mid, probably.
It was long periods of trials, tribulations, and eventually, war. New discoveries, before they decided the fate of their order would be changed forever. Welcome back, students of the Force, to our brand new documentary. Out of the many histories to be explored, it is finally time for us to tell the story of how the Jedi Order began. Explore how they became the guardians of the Republic.
Okay, but like the yellow lightsaber looks fucking badass, right?
public that we know them as for
Also, I just want to point out how, okay, so here's the thing. The different colors in lightsabers was just a big fucking retcon. I don't know if it was by George Lucas specifically or if it was by the studio, but it was just a huge retcon. All of the lore behind a lot of this is just a retcon because the lightsabers were only ever supposed to be green, blue, and red. Those were the only three colors. And honestly, I'm pretty sure one of them, pretty sure it was supposed to be like green and red or something like that, or maybe just blue and red. And then they had to add green in because the background was too blue and it wasn't showing correctly on video, right? So red, blue, and green were the three main colors. Those were the only colors. Red was supposed to be the dark side, and the blue and green were supposed to be for the light side. And honestly, the green was created solely because the fucking blue background wasn't showing right with the lightsaber battles. But whenever the Battle of Geonosis came around, Samuel L. Jackson decided that he wanted to be able to pick himself out of the big-ass group of Jedi that were fighting in this massive Coliseum. And he said, no, I want to have a purple lightsaber. And then they just said, fuck it, why not? They gave him a purple lightsaber. So the purple lightsaber, at least specifically, exists solely because Samuel L. Jackson wanted one. And then they decided to make a whole retcon about, oh, well, your kyber crystal will actually burn a purple color if you're relatively balanced kind of in the Force. And it'll do a yellow if you don't know and you're judging, blah, 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 blah.
long. In this video, we will be cataloging the entire 11 and a half.
Anyway, that's what I love about Star Wars lore. It's all just one big-ass retcon, and it's great.
1,000-year period for
they said, damn it, we've done a lot of things, and now we have to make it all make sense.
The moment that they were brought to Tython, to the moment that the Jedi pledged themselves to serve the Republic. This is the dawn of the Jedi. This is how the light awakens. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Chapter 1. The Tho-Yor Arrival.
Let's do it. Also, I don't know if you guys know, but Jedi is an actual religion in real life.
The year is 36,453 BBY. The galaxy has just exited its primordial era, and all of the species are still young and developing. Individual civilizations exist isolated on each planet, as hyperspace technology has not yet been invented.
Okay, so let me back this up just so everybody can follow along properly. This is the year 3,453 BBY. So BBY is essentially the same thing as our BC and AD, right? Except they used the Battle of Yavin, which is basically whenever they blew up the first Death Star, as far as I know. So this is basically 36,000 years before Luke blew up the first Death Star. Okay, is everybody following along? Right on, okay.
One strange phenomenon has taken place on 8 separate worlds. Long ago, odd pyramid-shaped starships inexplicitly arrived and lay dormant for millennia. These were known as
I fucking knew it! Pyramids are spaceships. I knew it!
Tho-Yor. These ships were made of an unknown material and were covered with strange markings that no species could decipher. However, they were powerful with the Force, and they drew intrigue for all who laid eyes upon them. While the makers of the Tho-Yor are unknown, it is speculated that it was the Celestials that had their hand in creation.
Yeah.
But our story actually begins on the snow-covered mid-rim.
Yeah, okay, so there's an awful lot of things that happen even before the creation of the first Jedi Order. So when they're talking about Celestials, they literally mean people that created the galaxy and move forces that can manipulate the galaxy.
World of Ando Prime.
We're talking about Abeloth right now. We're talking about the Father. We're talking about the beings of Mortis right now.
Here, the Order of the Dai Bendu reside. Though limited in their understanding, they were wise in the ways of the Force. In fact, they were said to be the first race to discover the existence of midichlorians. Importantly, much of the culture of the Jedi comes from the
He is the Bendu, the one in the
foundation laid
middle.
before by the Dai Bendu. Every year, the Dai Bendu scaled the snowy Andabi mountain to attend the Tho-Yor, to meditate upon it. It has nestled itself there in the mountain range for a very long time. The monks knew the Tho-Yor was not of their world, but they could perceive that it was powerful in the Force, and thus they were connected to it. They sensed that within the sealed structure, great mysteries were waiting to be revealed. And so the Dai Bendu would meditate at the structure, contemplate the Force and their destiny within it, until one day, when the Tho-Yor spoke, a voice imperceivable to the ear echoed out through the Force itself. The voice issued the Dai Bendu an invitation At the same time, the door to the Thoyor opened and accepted all who would enter. The ship rose from the mountain peak and departed the world of Ando Prime. Elsewhere across the galaxy, the 7 other Thoyor did the same for the inhabitants of their planets. On each one of these worlds, the native races had their own understanding of the Force, and yet, so many unanswered questions. That was, until the Thoyor activated there as well. One of the first to hear it would be the Wookiee mystics of the world of Kashyyyk. Hear it calling to them, hearing the hum of the light side, the hum of peace. On the world of Dathomir, the shamans and seers that predated even the Night Sisters heard the call as well. They experienced it in dreams and visions. The Twi'lek philosophers of Ryloth often debated the source of the living energy that surrounded the...
Okay, so what? Okay, wait. So after this giant galactic battle that I know happened prior to all of this, the Celestials just left small, like, pockets of light side force energy all over the place, and just basically dared the sentient beings that live around it to meditate and contemplate on what it might be until it is physically opened to receive them into the inside of it. That's what we're hearing. All right, yeah, sure, fuck it, why not? Yeah.
Thoyor and the galaxy itself. And when the Thoyor activated in their desert world and called to them, they instinctively knew the answer to their questions would lay within it. In the oceans of Manan, the Selkath scientists paused their studies as the doors of the great Thoyor opened, revealing its deep wisdom. The pyramid ships would then travel to many other worlds along their way, picking up many species. This would include humans, Iktachi, Cathar, Zabrak, Miraluka, Deveronians, Krivaki, and many more. They would even pick up the species of the Sith purebloods from the world of Korriban. For the possibility of light and balance still resisted within the purebloods, and once they had gathered enough sentience, the Thoyor ferried all species towards the center of the galaxy.
Like I said, the Force cares not for the petty squabbles of the light and dark side. It seeks only balance. Sure, this is a Sith, but there is still the possibility for balance within him, and as such, we will receive him.
Traveling through hyperspace, the Thoyor navigated the strange anomalies of the deep core to reach its final destination. Waiting for them on the Force-wealthy planet of Tython was the 9th, final, and the largest of the Thoyor. The planet of Tython was extremely sensitive to the Force, and with the arrival of all these beings who carried with it, rich within themselves, the planet heralded the arrival with great storms of power. Now that they had been brought to their new home, these people from distant cultures and...
Oh yeah, no, if I remember correctly, so Typhon is the planet that if you are not balanced in the Force, the planet itself will attack you with like vicious storms. So if you're like unbalanced in any way, the planet will fucking attack you. That's why the Jedi Masters of old were forced to become balanced, accepting both the light and the dark side and finding the common ground and living the way that they should have lived in pursuit of nothing other than the understanding of the living Force. Awesome.
Planets all came together as Tythons, and this event would become known as the First Great Migration, or the Thoyor Arrival. The first calendar used by the Tythons would actually be based on the Thoyor arrival, and it was abbreviated to TYA. Tython was a lush, beautiful world with a great variety of climates and ecology. A lot of it was covered in forest and jungles, but there were also volcanoes, deserts, and plains.
A lot of this is just plucked straight out of Star Wars: The Old Republic video game.
Filled with rising plateaus, mesmerizing rock formations. They quickly discerned that their purpose in this place was to study the Force, to master the abilities given to them. They didn't know why this had all happened, but none of them questioned it. They decided to pay no heed to the past or to the future, but to remain grounded in the present, where balance in the Force was maintained. But truly knowing the Force would require far more than just sitting in contemplation. They learned how to practice a sort of moving meditation, having the Force rush through them as they entered a flow state, allowing the Force to dictate their actions, truly manifesting it from within. Over the next 1,000 years, the Tythons built a great civilization, establishing temples, cities, places of learning, and healing, all of them centered around the 9 Thoyor ships, which had come to settle in various places around the world. Upon observing the world around them, they saw 2 moons in the sky, Light, Ashla, and Dark, Bogan, which taught...
Okay, so the light side, Ashla, would be the sister. the dark side, Bogan, would be the brother, and then there's the guy in the middle, the father, and then there's Chaos Incarnate, the mother, Abeloth, but that's like a whole different story.
Them the dual aspects of the Force.
Just so you know, if you hear the name Ashla, they're talking about the light side of the Force, like, or the incarnation of such. And if you hear Bogan, then it's the incarnation of essentially the dark side of the Force.
The light defined the dark as the dark did the light, and while contemplating this, they attempted to tame these wilds of Tython, but this would prove to be a beast all its own. The planet was so strong with the Force that if perfect balance was not maintained upon it, it would react with violent storms.
Yep, called it.
And worse, earthquakes. It wasn't just the natural disasters that provided threats either, but
I know, your boy knows things, I know.
Fauna contained many large and dangerous predators. This gave the Tythons both practice in combat and in reaching out to creatures through the living force. And so the Tythons defined themselves as a people ever seeking a great balance, for on their world, balance meant peace and safety. And to this end, they called themselves the Jedi, taking from two Dai Bendu words, those words being mystic and center. They determined that only through
the Mystic Center. All right, you know, they really should have just stuck with Mystic Center. That'd have been fucking awesome.
Harmony of balance could the Jedi maintain a peaceful planet. Those born with the ability to touch the Force were brought back to Tython, and they would pass from one temple to another, seeking knowledge and balance. But not all those who came with them on the Tho-Yor, and not every child born of the Jedi was a Force sensitive. And as such, they were at the mercy of the strict planet, and not even the Jedi could protect them. During one of Tython's severe...
Sorry, you want to live here, you're going to have to deal with the climate. That's just kind of how it works, unfortunately. Same thing with Florida. You want to live there, you got to deal with the climate, you know?
Lashouts, the city of Arum was utterly destroyed. And from that moment forward, it was made clear that Tython was simply too dangerous for those that could not touch the Force. And so, during the second millennium that they were there, a second migration would take place. All the Tythons who were not Jedi would depart. This was a time of great sorrow. Families were torn apart. But this was also a time of great necessity. These people would go out. They would settle the worlds in the Tythos system. They settled on the planets of Ashla and Bogan before leaving.
I wonder if it's a story, like, or a misconstrued story of this that led Yoda to forbid, like, relationships among his Jedi Order, right? Like, was it just like this story, and then Yoda took it as saying, oh, well, if you have a family, your family could get torn apart, and that would cause great chaos within you, even though they're talking about literally the fucking planet Typhon. All right, interesting. I'm just saying, like, it's possible that that could be, as passed down over the last 36,000 years, have been misconstrued into some sort of myth that would teach you to maintain balance within you, or there's a storm that could show, you know, I'm just saying, like, it's possible.
Colonize other worlds, including Tython. There were a total of 11 planets in the system for the settlers to venture to, and these planets were where the Jedi would get their start in keeping peace. From the nearest to the star Tythos to the furthest, these were the planets. Sunspot and Maltera are two small worlds that rotate in opposite directions around the star. When the two planets pass one another in their near orbits, both worlds experience violent storms. While they were far too hot to actually live on, they were very useful for mining operations due to valuable ores that could be found within. To this end, Sentience made a great use of envirosuits to make brief but important excavation trips. The next world in the system is known as Nox, and it ended up becoming an industrial planet. They focused on the manufacturing of products which were very hazardous to the environment. As a result, over the next several centuries, it got so polluted that its cities must be sheltered under domes supplied with filtered air. The next planet is known as the Cave.
That's just Vegas. Fuck. All right.
Ur,
or Beijing right now.
Is an arid world, pocket-marked by its inactive volcanoes. The atmosphere here is so hot, and the surface is so dry, that no unprotected life can survive for very long at all. The only thing that grows there are strange kind of blue crystals, and tall spires of glass. But lying underground is an enormous network of caverns and lakes. Within these caverns, an entire ecosystem is able to live and thrive.
It's like Mars, right? Where there's water underground.
Moisture trapped there allows rain to fall within the caverns, giving life to alien plants and underworld jungles. Tython is the 5th planet from Tythos, and behind it is the world of Kalamar, a cosmopolitan world with a very large population. One may even say that Kalamar is like Tythos' own Coruscant, only it wasn't covered in a planet-wide city. Kalamar was the
Fucking thankfully, planet-wide city is a terrible-ass idea.
first planet colonized after
You know what
Titan.
sounds even better than a planet-wide city, though? Building a hanging city on the edge of a cliff. That is a much better idea.
And this is one of the most densely populated of the entire worlds in the sector. Because of this, it also has the business and the religious hub for the entire system of Titan. Here, they had beautifully crafted cities of white metal comprised of tall spires.
Shit, it's Dubai.
Preserved the natural land as well, building their own cities on green hillsides in front of gorgeous mountain scenery. Shikakwa is a largely aquatic world ruled by the feudal gangster clans. The Nine Houses, as they are known, are headed by an aristocracy who rules the land and interests of Shikakwa. For the longest time, the houses all answered to a single overlord known as Kral. Skagora is the next planet, a temperate green world almost completely made up of forests and swamp. In an effort to preserve the planet's lively wilderness, almost all of the planet's population live in floating city ships very similar to how the Ithorians live. Apparently though, some Wookiees have illegally colonized the forests of this world, and no one has challenged their claim to it. Next up are
Who the hell is going to challenge a Wookiee for claim to anything? They will rip you in half, man. What?
planets
I don't know
of
if you know
Obri
about
and
Wookiees.
Mar, which are two gas giants in the system that each boast having several moons. The colonists have populated many of these moons and have set up many gas mining facilities within the atmospheres of the
That is one thing that I really love about the Star Wars universe, right? Like, so there's an awful lot of different planets that people live on, right? But there's an equal, if not greater, number of moons that people live on, honestly, too. Because what you'll find is that a lot of the moons are habitable, while the planet itself, being too large or too gaseous or whatever, isn't. Or even more possible is that the society that lived on the planet fucked the planet up and then had to retreat to the moons that were around, and then they colonized those moons, and those moons are now like terraformed over the years and stuff, right? So there's an awful lot of planets that they can visit in the Star Wars universe, but there's also an awful lot of moons, and I, for one, really enjoy that because I'm also a huge space nerd.
Science. And finally, the outermost world in the Tythos system is Fury's Gate. The world is mostly barren, with the only inhabitants being those that live on a single scientific outpost. There, you can find an observatory that watches the rest of the deep core, called the Fury Station, which is a space station that orbits the planet. Although these planets were largely independent, the Jedi would interfere whenever it was requested of them, but sometimes they would intervene without request if the Force had directed them to, keeping balance.
Hell yeah, they are their own society that should have remained that way. There's no reason they should have decided to become the universal police force for the fucking Republic. It was wrought with corruption from the very beginning. They should have maintained their stance as an independent nation and country and planet and order of beings that accepts all, much like America does nowadays, or at least they used to. And then they would join if it became necessary for them to do so, right? They're like the Ents. Usually, they weather the storms because it all passes, but occasionally, they have to stand up and rip a wizard out of his tower, you know?
Something that felt very important to them everywhere they went, not just Tython. Over the centuries, the settlers somewhat forgot about their ancestry, the world of Tython, and the Jedi, and as a result, these strange monks became mysterious and even feared figures of legend. But now that we've established the setting for which the Jedi Order existed, it's now time for us to talk about the Order itself. The Jedi always prided themselves on the structure, discipline, and the culture of temple life, so let's observe what it looked like in their ancient past, before they were the Jedi. Chapter 2, Life on Tython. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge.
Okay, life on Typhon. We know that the planet itself will literally attack you if you are not balanced within the Force. So I imagine life on Typhon is probably pretty difficult, honestly.
There is no fear.
I imagine it's not an easy task to grow up just living on this planet, let alone living on the planet and training to be a Jedi.
There is power.
Alongside fucking Bigfoot.
I am the heart of the Force. I am the revealing fire of light. I am the mystery of the darkness, in balance with chaos and harmony, immortal in the Force. This was the code of the ancient Jedi Order. It perfectly represented their desire to forever remain in the balance between light and dark, or what they called Ashla and the Bogan.
Yeah.
In the Jedi philosophy, they acknowledged the fact that there was always a light within the darkness, and a darkness within the light, so that it was impossible for one to ever truly be free of either. In fact, the ancient Jedi were encouraged to give in to the temptations of both light and dark, as they believed it was necessary to embrace both.
If you want to achieve balance, you must, by necessity, give in to the temptations of both light and dark side, because you must understand the dark side to know about it. You must have succumbed to the dark side to be wise in its ways.
In order to learn more about the whole of the Force, the light brought peace, clarity, serenity, life, and logic. However, ebbing too far to the Ashla could cause one to become rigid, cold, and mired in indecision. The dark brought emotions that spur one to action such as passion, pain, and anger. They did not believe these things to be harmful when used properly though, and the Jedi claimed that anger could—
the ancient Jedi understood that emotions are necessary and natural. It's controlling them that is important.
cleanse like fire could. But if one only felt anger, then they would be out of balance, and they would be incapable of showing forgiveness or compassion. They used the light and the dark in tandem to save the lives of both innocents, themselves, and their enemies. The Jedi believed that restoring all things to balance was their purpose, and that was their singular goal to keep in mind when facing an enemy. Mercy should be taken at every opportunity, but if there was no other way, then they may destroy an enemy to restore the balance.
Absolutely, and I encourage you all to take this into consideration with your own life. So you have to be capable of violence. You don't have to actually go out and perform violence all the time, but you do have to be capable of it. Being harmless is not a virtue, okay? Being a pussy is not a virtue at all. There is a difference between being meek and being humble enough not to draw your sword, okay? You have to be capable of harming someone because, unfortunately, sometimes violence is in fact the answer, and you can't always talk it out.
In the beginning, they lived a monolithic lifestyle as scholars, builders, and artists. Combat was really the furthest thing from their mind until it became something that needed to protect them, to protect the weak even, the innocents from the dangers of the galaxy. And to this end, they believed that each of their numbers
Combat should be a last resort, but a resort nonetheless.
Should be fully armed with the Force as their ally, and the temperance of their guide. The very first thing to talk about when it comes to life on ancient Tython was the 9 different separate temples. The entire life of the young Jedi surrounded these temples, with each one being crafted from 1 or 2 of the Tho-Yor, and each of them representing a different field of study. The way the Jedi initiates actually progressed through their studies was not always under one specific master, at least, not for very long, but by going on a personalized journey through each and every temple. You would start at 1, and then once you graduated, you would move on to the next until you graduated from all of them.
Yeah, this would be badass. Hell yeah, this is the way to do it.
Wasn't a requirement though.
And the whole time you have to maintain your balance in the Force or the planet will attack you.
Some Jedi chose to remain at any of one
This is why the masters of today are but children playing with sticks compared to the might of the Jedi of old.
Temples and specialize in whatever subject the temple centered around. But by and large, they were expected to visit all of them before making a decision on whether they wanted to stay at one specific temple. These are each of the temples that we know of. The first was known as Caliph, the Temple of Knowledge. This one was perched over a Force nexus, and this is where the Jedi gathered as a whole when
Okay, so in addition to there being 9 different temples, they all symbolize something different and pursue something different in the Force. That is fucking badass. Hell yeah.
Task came at hand. It was here
where they— why can't we get a video game of this? This would be awesome.
First founded the Great Library, and it was here that decisions are made on behalf of the entire order. While the official High Council did not exist yet, each of the headmasters of every temple would come together as representatives of each part of Tython in order to form what is called—
Okay, so this is the Temple of Knowledge. All right, honestly, this might be where I would go, really.
—as the Master's Council, and it was here on Caliph where they would meet. The next temple is known as Bodhi, the Temple of the Arts. This was located on
the Temple of the Arts. Okay, hold on. I didn't know that Jedi had artists. What?
Rain plains near the Pleasant Forests. This is where students and masters study the Force as manifested through the arts, such as writing, dancing, calligraphy, drawing, sculpting.
Hold on. You can manifest the Force with that shit too. What is happening right now? What?
Cooking, music, and even theater. This truly characterizes how the original Jedi were. If you think about it,
use the Force and perform Shakespeare, Luke. Do it. Use the Force and carve that statue, Michelangelo.
Jedi were comprised of all different types of species, so it only makes sense that the Order would be very rich with all kinds of culture, while they had a collective identity.
You know, it does make sense that you can channel it into being a good artist, I guess. That's fair. It does make sense, and it fits with what we know about the Force. It's just not at all what I thought could be done. Damn. Okay.
Of being students of the Force.
And look at this. Look at this. They have a purple lightsaber here, as though that shit was even a thought in George Lucas's mind.
Still appreciated the traditions of their ancestry. They understood that the Force manifested itself through lifestyle and art, and so chose to have an entire temple devoted to this. Anilkesh was the temple of science. Here is where the Jedi scientists plumbed the mysteries of Force alchemy.
Nope, this right here, this is where I would be, flat out, hands down, this is where I am. This is where I'm staying, too. I don't even care about the other 5.
This is on the
the other 6.
Theoretical, but the results are often
Alright, so we have the Temple of Knowledge, we have the Temple of the Arts, and now the Temple of Science.
Practical and sometimes dangerous. This place straddled the chasm, a gorge so deep that no one has ever found the bottom of it.
It straddles the chasm. Chat, do you hear this? It is boring deep for that sweet, sweet science.
Something within the chasm interferes with the senses of Force sensitives. In fact, the stronger in the Force one was, and the deeper they went into the chasm, the worse the interference would become.
Okay.
The chasm represents the unsolvable mysteries of the Force, and some Jedi scientists have gone mad trying to learn the chasm's dark secrets. This was why the Temple of Science had to be built over it, since that was a place of discovery amidst confusion.
Okay,
Maharakesh was the Temple of Healing. This one is located on the deep
Temple of Healing. This is where the women go. Bet.
With great portions of it extending underwater. The focus
where all the female shinobi are.
Here is, as the name suggests, the healing arts, both with and without the Force. The ways of healing were a special interest of many ancient Jedi. After all, the Force itself was life incarnate. Therefore, it could be used for the pursuit of bringing balance, maintaining balance in that life. While they understood that death was a natural part of it, they believed that it was their duty to ensure that unnecessary death never befalls those around them. And so they trained their students to heal others with both the Force, and those that had a talent with it would develop medicine. Then you have the Vertep, the Forge. This temple lies directly over
the Forge?
Active volcano, and it utilizes the heat of the magma to provide the power to the entire structure. The emphasis of the study of the Vertep is one of practical, and how the Force can be manifest physically. This is where they crafted their gear, specifically their metal swords. Swords that we'll go more in depth about.
Okay, they have metal, so I could have sworn I saw lightsabers though. They're not using kyber crystals yet?
Briefly here. Next, you have the Qigong Cache, which was a temple of Force skill. This was located in the
Keep in mind, this is all 36,000 years prior to the current day not current day Star Wars, but like, you know, New Hope, whenever Star Wars is supposed to end.
Desert, and this is where many students honed their mental and their sensory abilities. This place was actually the perfect for students focusing on their own mental power. The Silent Desert is named so because all sound dies there due to some undiscovered element of the sand. Sound waves are somehow absorbed into the sand directly, rendering it completely quiet for miles upon miles around the temple, making it the perfect place to study and train. In the cold and the snowy mountains, we have Stavkash.
Also, I fucking called it. There's a bunch of women.
Which was the temple of martial arts.
In the Forge. Oh yeah, I forgot. Fuck, we'd moved on. Shit.
Arts. This is the temple where the Jedi learned to fight, both in hand-to-hand combat training and with their swords.
Oh, Jedi's throwing hands now. Okay, back. Oh, all right. Okay, all right. Equal rights, equal lefts.
In order to learn how to manipulate the Force within their bodies to protect the weak, this is where they became the
We don't need lightsabers and Force powers. We got these hands, boy.
Legendary warriors that the galaxy would come to know them as. But before the days of the 7 forms of lightsaber combat, their dueling looked very different. While unfortunately we don't have a lot of information of what their sword training was actually like, we do know of the martial exercises that they performed. Their form was called Alchaka, and it was a vigorous style that some of the Jedi jokingly claim was invented just to keep warm on the mountaintops. The Alchaka meditations were a rigorous series of highly personal, repetitive exercising uses both physical and force skills at once. It consisted of a high number of repetitions and dizzying movements performed in complex positions. Completing the meditations correctly typically left the practitioner on the brink of exhaustion. The purpose of Alchaka was to serve as a type of moving meditation, to clear the mind and attune the body to the strength of the Force. And now we reach Padawan Kesh, the Jedi Academy. At this temple was where the very young initiates were housed and taught.
So this is temple number 1. This is where the babies go. Got it.
Until their formal training under a Jedi Master. And that name, Padawan, has lasted throughout the Jedi Order's history. And finally, we have Akarkash, the Temple of Balance. Above the towering pinnacle of
I'm gonna be in the Temple of Science. I'm straddling that chasm all the way.
Then floats the largest of the Tho-Yor, the original Tho-Yor. It was valued as a place of introspective contemplation. Here, the balancing of the light and dark sides of the Force was taught. The balance of the Ashla and the Bogan was so important to the Jedi that they forbade their members from falling too far to either side. In fact, when a Jedi fell too far into the light, they were banished to Ashla to meditate on the moon of Bogan. And of course, if you were to fall too far into the dark, they were banished to Bogan to meditate on Ashla. This was because both moons were always in sight of one another, so the prisoners could contemplate while gazing upon the opposite moon that they needed to strive towards a balance. Once the Jedi Masters reevaluated the banished Jedi and determined that they had achieved balance, they were allowed to return to Tython. These were all of the temples found on Tython. But what about the ranking system of the...
I forgot. It had 2 moons, Ashland and Boga, and they were fucking prison moons. You will be in balance, or the planet will attack us all. Damn it, you're gonna go there until you get right with your god.
Jedi Order, and how it differed from modern Jedi.
Damn, look at that badass sword. It's got like a dagger on the end of it. That's fucking so cool.
Started as initiates at Padawan Kesh. This is the first rank, where they were raised in the ways of the Force until they reached adolescence, where they would then be selected by a master to be trained as an apprentice. There were 2 ways that they could be trained, either directly at Padawan Kesh or around Tython, depending on the master's teaching style. Once the master felt that the student was ready and had completed their training, the Jedi would be promoted to a journeyer. This was sometime during their teenage years. It was here where
journeyer.
They would undertake the Great Journey, which was the odyssey that took them across Tython to the rest of the 9 temples that we
okay, all right, I'm with you, okay.
Mentioned.
This is when they begin their journey to go and visit the 9 temples, and at each temple they train with the temple master until they decide that they're good enough to leave. Okay, all right.
Trek would be taken alone and largely by foot. And it wasn't just about...
the training of the older Jedi Order is so much more rigorous than Yoda's fucking Jedi Order is.
Gaining knowledge, but finding...
And Luke basically goes, okay, here's the basics. When you're good enough, you'll get a lightsaber, and then you basically just go do whatever you think is right.
One's own self and place within the Force. Great journeys typically lasted only 2 years, but could be much longer depending on the progress or the aptitude of the journeyer. It's also usually during this time of learning and introspection that the Jedi would select what discipline they wanted to devote their lives to. Upon a successful completion of a great journey, they were elevated to the rank of a Jedi Ranger. This was the equivalent of a Jedi Knight in rank. It came with much privilege, prestige, and duty. Rangers were deployed across the Tytho system to take care of assignments given to them by the Council, or to intervene with planets that needed their aid, whether by request or by the...
And they don't even have lightsabers at this point, or at least I'm not seeing them anyway, so what they have is Force powers and these hands.
The will of the Force. Because of their constant work...
They're like Achilles and his Myrmidon.
Keeping the peace either...
That one has a gun in her pocket, and a sword. Jesus!
Diplomacy, ending conflicts, hunting fugitives, or helping impoverished civilizations. Some Rangers rarely ever returned to their homeworld of Tython. Some stayed on the move, and others would make their home on the planets or moons in the system. But if a Jedi Ranger had shown a sufficient amount of wisdom, experience, and an understanding of the Force, they would be promoted to the rank of Master. and it was here where they would often make their homes at one of the temples to teach the next generation of Jedi. The path of the Jedi was laid out pretty plainly, and along that way, they would have to do what every other follower of the light has to eventually do, that is, craft their weapon. Earlier, we mentioned their metal swords, which was a staple of the Order around this era. Much like the ancient Sith, the Jedi—
Damn, look at those, fuck, that is bad. It's got like runes and stuff on it too. Oh, that is so cool.
used Force alchemy to imbue their weapons with the Force—
Force alchemy to imbue their weapons with the Force
itself.
So it's Force hockey on their swords. Okay.
It was an important step in their journey to visit the Vertep Forge, to partake in the ceremony of crafting.
Okay, so the Jedi of old used armament hockey, and the Jedi nowadays have photon swords like bitches. You know what? It makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah, they are children playing with sticks.
Their blade. The forging process went something like this. An initiate would send a bar of high carbon metal. For a while, this was just Durasteel, but later on, the Jedi began to use more of an alloy that they referred to as Mad Dog Steel. This was named after the Vertep's headmaster, Tem Mad Dog, who chemically created a blade of steel that was so durable that it was thought to be unbreakable. They would then hammer this from a bar into a blade, and all the while it was being forged, the Force was channeled into the blade by the user, altering the molecular structure of the metal into a refined lattice, both to further harden the blade and sharpen its edge without the need for any grindstone. Once the blade was forged, the initiate would place a crystal in the hilt of the blade.
What the fuck? What is that? That looks like something you'd buy off the M48 Tactical Assault magazine. Jesus.
Some sources to suggest that the Jedi did not use kyber crystals back in this day. While they hadn't yet discovered the living nature of the crystals, they were aware of their power in the Force, and did use them in their blades.
Pro tip, you do not need a kyber crystal necessarily to make a lightsaber.
Accomplish this, they would submerge themselves in deep meditation, pouring the Force into the blade itself and the crystal until they married all of it together, metal and crystal as one. Once it was finished, the wielder would channel the Force through the sword until it would begin to glow with a misty energy, indicating that the blade had been permanently infused with the Force. Despite not being lightsabers, crafting these swords was no less of an extremely personal process. The blades were also very powerful.
Well, yeah, they have to literally hammer out the metal by themselves. I imagine it's incredibly personal.
Themselves, sharp enough to cut through almost anything. This further required a trained—
Fucking made Sokka over here from Avatar: The Last Airbender make his own sword.
And a steady hand from the Jedi wielder, one flowing with the Force. Yet their use of alchemy did not stop at the creation of swords. At the Temple of Anil Kesh, the Jedi also performed alchemy on creatures, genetically manipulating them to serve the Force.
Yep.
We know that many years in the future, the Jedi—
Yep, this is why science would be my temple. This is where I would go. I would straddle this fucking chasm, and I would imbue everything with Force alchemy. You don't understand.
Would consider this to be a twisting of life, and therefore would go against everything they stood for. But for the Jedi, before the Jedi Order, they were still discovering how the Force worked and functioned. They did not know what they were doing, but at the very least, they did not dip too much into the dark side and actually use Sith alchemy. Their alchemy was more pure. Unfortunately, many of their methods have since been lost to time, but we are aware of them having created and trained Rancors with wings known as Rancor dragons. But despite being in an age of swords and sorcery—
And they did it all with a regular ass armament hockey imbued sword.
The Jedi had access to a variety of technologies as well. They still had communicators and hologram technology, as well as access to a variety of specially made ships. There were 4 specific kinds of air and spacecraft primarily used by the Jedi. The Cloud Chaser was known as a lighter-than-air ship meant to cross terrestrial distances. It had a barrel-shaped body with an insect-like wings and a fin on both the top and the bottom. The Pateran Glider was a short-range atmospheric starfighter with wings shaped like our world's pterodactyls. Whenever a Jedi was promoted to a Ranger, they would get their choice between the 2 kinds of interstellar ships that they have on their own. These 2 are known as the Peacemaker-class cruiser or the Hunter-class starfighter. The Hunter is heavily armed and specifically designed for battle. It was noted as being the fastest and the most maneuverable ship class in the Tythos system. The Peacemaker is used primarily for travel, including diplomatic missions or interventions. It is capable of fast travel between the planets of the Tython system. While not as nimble as the hunter was, the peacemaker was still armed very well for defense, and even for aggressive negotiations. One ranger, named Lana Ree Brock, noted that the peacemaker was preferable for longer trips, since it had a
Lana Ree I really hope that's her name, because this is an interesting looking character to me.
lot more room for living space, and was not just a simple cockpit. The last thing we want to talk about the Jedi when it comes to their lifestyle is actually marriage. This was back long before this sort of thing was forbidden. While many of the Jedi chose not to marry in order to remain focused on the Force, a lot of them did have families and children. It was from several generations of these families that the Order was often replenished with new members. But the Masters did warn those who married not to allow their feelings of attachment to become jealousy or provoke them into anger, as such things would imbalance them. But now that we've firmly established what life was like on Tython, let us continue with the rest of the Jedi Order's history and foundation.
Okay.
Chapter 3, The Despot War. For almost 10,000 years, the Jedi...
All right, so we finally moved on from 36,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, which again is the first time that Luke destroyed the Death Star. This is the whole, there's a 3 fucking meter wide hole and it's no bigger than a womp rat type thing. That's when that fucking happened. So we finally moved on. We're skipping forward about 10,000 years. Up to this point, for the last 10,000 years, Jedi have been allowed to marry. They've been allowed to have families. They grow up on Typhon, which is a planet that actively tries to kill them if they are not balanced in the Force. They have Force alchemy that they can make mechas and shit with. They can imbue their sword with armament Force hockey. They can tame flying rancors and are known as the most feared fighting force in the universe. Okay, all right. And now we're skipping forward 10,000 years. All right.
kept peace and balance in the Tythos system. But the first time that we would see a real war and bloodshed on a mass scale was in 25,805 BBY, in an event known as the Despot War. Queen Hadia of Shikawa began a process of unifying, subjugating the aristocracy of her planet under her rule. She became what is known as the Krall of the Shikawa, and she planned to use her newfound power and authority to bring the rest of the planets in the Tythos system under her sole command, including the Jedi. With charisma and promises of safety, she began persuading the masses to her side, proclaiming that the Jedi were mainly those that wanted to control them, to have them rule under their thumb. All those of the noble houses that defied her will were executed. Seeing Hadia's movements as a threat to peace, the Jedi decided to intervene. But the Mad Queen's pride was not the subject of the Jedi, nor the will of the Force. She decided that her own will would be supreme, and so began the Despot War. The Jedi sided with the Shikawa, most of whom either openly or secretly opposed Hadia's rule as Krall. There was a short period of war where smaller skirmishes took place on various moons throughout the system and the world of Kalamar. But then, Queen Hadia launched her real attack, a full assault of Tython with a despot army that she had trained in secret. At first, the Jedi were taken by utter surprise and shock, but
why would you attack them on their home planet? All right, okay.
Order was able to mount an impressive defense against her invasion.
Oh shit!
The war on Tython lasted at least several months.
Did they survive, or is this when Typhon fell?
The two sides fought brutally against one another. Many of the domed cities on the planet of Nox sided with the Jedi, while others would side with the Queen. When the Jedi discovered the 3 domes around the city of Greenwood Station were supplying Hadia with weaponry, though, they attempted to convince them to stop. But here's where the Jedi Order does something drastic for the first time in their history.
Oh.
When all negotiations failed, the Order resorted to bombing the cities.
Oh, shit. Oh, damn. Listen, we tried to do this peacefully, and it's not working, so we're gonna bomb the shit out of them. Who knew Trump was a Jedi, man? I'm just saying.
Jedi had warned the dome's inhabitants of the incoming bombing.
But hey, we're bombing all of you. Get out of there or don't. We don't care. We can't let this continue.
Thousands would still die in the attack. Although the damage would be quickly repaired, many of the inhabitants of Nox would go on to harbor an intense hatred for the Jedi. This was a time before the Jedi Order had figured out the subtleties of proper negotiation.
Yeah, the fucking Jedi gave them the whole Nagasaki Hiroshima treatment, man. Damn.
heretofore.
Said, listen, we're gonna paint the walls with all of your shadows until you give up.
They had only been involved themselves in lower disputes. All in all, the Despot War put them completely out of their depth, and it was showed. The Jedi did a couple of the more questionable things during the war, proving that even they could become desperate. Apparently
it fucking worked, didn't it?
desperate enough to sire the first of the Torrent attacks.
The what? This is the thing that, like, eats Jedi, right? Like,
that's right. It seems this infamous creature wasn't entirely a
this is the Star Wars Tyrannid is what this is.
Creation, but rather of Jedi alchemy. Master Quang Jang, Headmaster Anil Kesh at the Temple of Science.
Wait, hold on. It was a creation by one of the Jedi alchemists? You
genetically engineered monsters.
This is the problem with science, man. This is the problem with scientists as a whole. They'll start the zombie apocalypse just to see what'll happen.
Known as the Tarenta, whose purpose was to sniff out the Shikawan explosives. However, these experiments would go horrifically wrong and created beasts that had a thirst for Force-sensitive flesh. These are clearly the ancestors of the Torrent attacks, the only difference being that the Torrenta are noticeably smaller, perhaps only a little taller than the average humanoid. Nevertheless, they were extremely dangerous, and so it was the Jedi that shipped them all to the moon of Bogan. But one of the most deadly creatures that we have always blamed the Sith for here at the Archives were actually a creation of the very first of the Jedi. Moving on.
Yeah, and then we kind of just left them all on Bogan, because that's the dark side one, and they look like they're dark side.
Two members of the Master's Council, Master Tilat and Master Rajavari,
you know what? I don't know how he has this black eye, but I'm sure he deserves it.
became war heroes during this invasion. Rajavari himself won many battles and would earn the nickname of the General, one that stuck with him for the rest of his life, even against his own wishes. Master Tilat was the leader of the Master's Council. He may in fact be what we would call the first Grand Master, though the title did not exist at the time. Unfortunately though, Tilat was slain in battle, thus leading Rajavari's apprentice, Master
Kind of a shitty Grand Master if he was killed in battle, am I right?
Ketu to replace him.
Like, you don't see Yoda falling in battle, even whenever he started beating the hell out of Sidious, and Sidious was like, nope, no, I can't win this, shoot him right now, kill him.
The war raged on. One of the noble houses of
And Yoda was like 900 years old. What the hell is this guy's excuse?
Clan Ryo would openly resist Queen Hadia. She would then execute the leader of Clan Ryo and his oldest son, which would lead the middle son, Volnos Ryo, to take up the title of Baron and lead his house forward.
Those are some strong words. Your mother has a powerful claim on you.
Volnos was unprepared for this mantle and never expected to actually rule, since he was the second of 3 brothers. The third of his brothers, Hawk Ryo, had actually become a Jedi, and both Volnos' wife and his daughter were Jedi as well. Completely out of his depth and filled with vengeance, Volnos Ryo used his connections with the Order to seek out a man by the name of Dagan Locke. He needed Dagan Locke to formulate a plan that would strike directly at the heart of the Queen. With the help of Volnos, Dagan went to the Despot army, claiming to be a disgraced ranger who wished to join their ranks. He managed to infiltrate their ranks successfully and actually rise to the level of lieutenant, gaining Hadia's trust personally. But during this process, Dagan Locke lost sight of the mission and ended up becoming her lover. He would only be shaken back to his senses after Hadia's ruthless siege of the Temple of Calith, which resulted in a massive casualty event on both sides of the war. Volnos would confront Dagan, remind him of his mission to end the war.
Oh no,
Locke,
they attacked the Temple of Knowledge.
However, was convinced that the huge death toll was
That's the big fucking library. That's probably like one of the most important ones, if we're being honest. It's got all of the books.
Technically on his hands for not ending the war sooner. So that night, he ventured into the Queen's tent, one that he now shared with her, to end her life. However, his feelings for her, coupled with the fact that the assassinations were forbidden among the Jedi, made him hesitate. But when the Despot Queen attacked him in return, Dagan Locke slew her and proceeded to fight his way out of the camp. Hadia's death broke the invasion. Their queen dead, this caused the generals to turn on one another, and the Jedi soon defeated the remnants of the Death.
Look, some good puss will do something to a guy, okay? Like, you send him in there to infiltrate the queen, and he infiltrates a little bit too hard, and then it just all gets real hazy and confusing, okay? Like, he came to his senses, at least in the end, but we're not gonna look at this guy and pretend like we knew he was gonna be a good dude.
Army and emerged the official victors of the war. Since this was their first war, they made many mistakes.
Look at this guy. Yep, definite hero right there. That guy. This is somebody that I would trust my life with for sure. This is somebody I would go, oh yeah, that guy's definitely a good guy. He's not a bad guy at all.
And the death toll among the Jedi was estimated to be around 100,000, with thousands more injured in the conflict. The Order then dismantled all warships that were constructed during this era, so that they could again seek a state of balance. They then put a much weaker leader on the world of Shikawa, who would
Oh yeah, and they're doing all these battles on Typhon, so it's probably it's not like it's a sunny day.
rise up the way that Hadia had. However, in revenge for the bombing of the world of Nox and the domed cities, Greenwood Station sanctioned the murder of a Jedi in return for every 100 civilians who had been killed in the bombings, and the assassinations continued across the system, even 2 to 3 years after the war's end. Public opinion had somewhat turned against the Jedi for the first time, and they were viewed—
Yeah, shockingly enough, when you vaporized a city full of civilians to get your point across, the surviving civilians don't really like you very much.
As the villains of the war by many. There was a general sense of resentment towards them by the wider Tytho system. Master Rajavari was so disturbed by the events of the war that he laid his weapon down and went into a self-imposed exile, going to one of the thousands of islands surrounding the Temple of Akarkesh in order to meditate peacefully.
That's what I'm talking about. She's just ready to throw hands, man. Like, we got this woman over here pulling her swords out. This guy looks like he's got a gun on his hip, and she's just ready to throw hands.
Master Ketu still occasionally visited Master Rajavari for advice though, as he believed his old mentor's insight to be invaluable. For his role in ending the war, Dagan Lok was promoted to a Jedi Master. But 5 years later, in the year 25,800 BBY, he, along with Hawk Ryo, were prideful after their grand victory, and decided that they would spelunk into the depths of the chasm, and to be the first ones to discover what truly lay at the bottom. But again, the chasm of the world of Tython had a strange interference with the senses of the Jedi, and anyone who ventured too deep went insane. The two disregarded this warning, and went in anyway. But
yeah, I wonder if this is a calling to that. So there's like some super deep hole on Earth that they call it like the gateway to hell or the devil's entrance or something like that. And there was a dude that they lowered down into that hole just as far as he could go. And whenever he went down, he's like a relatively, I think he was like early middle age, you know, he probably like early to mid 30s maybe, you know, where he was still pretty young. They lowered him down there, and then all of a sudden he starts screaming and fucking flailing around once he gets to a certain depth, and then they bring him back up, and he's pale as a ghost, and he's got a head full of completely white hair. Like whatever he saw was incredibly stressful for him. So I'm wondering if this is kind of like symbolizing that a little bit, right? Like painting a picture in sci-fi terms of what that thing is in real life.
Venturing into its depths, they were accosted by a terrifying vision of an army of dark warriors wielding blades of fire, marching across Skagora. In Dagan Lok's vision, he saw himself wielding one of these blades, leading an army to oppose the invaders. He also saw a gateway that led to thousands of worlds, a new galaxy. The vision drove Dagan Lok insane, driving him eventually to fully embrace the dark side. Ryo managed to push aside the visions and to pull the two of them out of the chasm, rescuing Dagan. When questioned by the Master's Council, Dagan Lok told them of what he had seen and warned them of a coming war, a new threat. However, the Council did not believe in his vision. The Despot Wars had been bad enough, and the after effects were costing the Jedi their very lives. They did not want to consider—
I can already see where this is going to be heading. Yes, that's what he saw, but it's going to be somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy because he's going to march on the peaceful members of this order.
For yet another war, or formulate an army which would only serve to frighten the rest of the system. But Dagon Lok was undeterred. He proclaimed that balance would not avail a second time, and that war would come for them, and the only way to stop it would be embracing the dark side, giving into the strength to fight this distant threat. He believed that they would need the dark side, or they would be utterly destroyed. He would even go as far to develop a strange ability known as Mind Twist, which uses the fears of other beings to manipulate them. As a result, both Dagon Lok and Hawk Ryo were exiled to the moon of Bogan, like many before them, where the two were ordered to meditate, to restore their own inner balance. Master Ketu would later visit his old friend Rajavari on the island to tell him about the vision of Dagon Lok. Master Rajavari decided to backlog this information in his own mind, as he disagreed with the council's decision to ignore the vision. On Bogan, Hawk Ryo maintained his sanity, convincing himself that he had not seen the vision, or that whatever he had seen had been a lie, a trick of the chasm. Dagon Lok, however, became obsessed with the vision, and continued to pour himself deeper into the dark side, despite all the help that Hawk attempted to give him.
Wait, aren't those creatures on the Bogan moon too? Like, are they getting attacked this whole time?
Eventually, Ryo was allowed to return to Tython once the Masters had decided that he had restored balance within himself. However, Dagon Lok would remain on the moon for another 7 years, leading us into the next event that would change the course of the Jedi and galactic history forever. Chapter 4, Balance Destroyed. Part
shit, okay.
1, Storm on Tython. It is now the year 25,793 BBY, 12 years after the ending of the Despot War, and a new darkness brews on the fringes of space.
So this is like a whole story that is relatively close enough together that they could make a series out of it.
The Infinite Empire, led by the Rakatan overlords, have journeyed into the deep
Yeah, the Rakatans are the bad guys. If you look into any kind of Star Wars lore, you will know that the Rakatans exist solely for war, and what they do better than just about anybody else is appropriate someone else's technology and make it their own. Almost all of what they have, they fucking found. They are a scavenger race.
And set up a base on the world of Biss. The Rakata were a ruthless ancient species who only used the dark side and lived by ways of conquest,
by ways of conquest. Yep, they are a warfaring species that adopts what everyone else has as their own.
Slavery and cannibalism. They were the first to have any sort of hyperdrive technology in the galaxy too, as it worked by locking onto force-rich planets and then traveling through hyperspace to reach that destination. Using this technology, they were able to build an empire purely around force-based technology, utilizing powerful force-sensitive slaves that they called their hounds. The Rakata located worlds rich in the Force, and then conquered them. They would destroy cities, enslave, or feast on the inhabitants of worlds. Some slaves were used for work. Others were placed in batteries that harnessed their rage, pain, in order to fuel the Rakatan engines, powered by the dark side itself. Each overlord, or what the Rakatans called the Predor, had their own personal hound, and Predor Skalnas, the overlord in charge of the contingent that was exploring deep space, had his hound locate a possible world that was rich in the Force. Trill was her name, and she swears that she can feel a powerful world, but she was having an extremely difficult time pinning down the exact location. And so, Skalnas
what the fuck is up with this makeup? I mean, what?
Sent for his rivals and supported.
Nobody thinks that. I don't know where you live, lady, but there's nobody on any planet anywhere that thinks that is attractive.
The Predor, Tulkar, and the Hound by the name of Zesh. This one has been proven to be the most capable of all of the hounds in the Infinite Empire. Zesh accepted this challenge of located this supposed world, which sends him on a collision course with Tython and the Jedi. While Zesh travels to the world, he astral projects himself through the Force. In doing this, he was able to scout out Tython to learn of the inhabitants. But a group of 3 Jedi journeyers end up having a strange connection to him through the Force, allowing them to actually perceive his astral form. They believe this to be a vision, and it causes a disruption in each of their activities. The first was a female Dathomiri human by the name of Shay Koda, a brave but a reckless young one, who was orphaned when her parents were killed during the Despot War. She saw Zesh's projection, and she was attempting to wrangle a spooked Rancor dragon. The second Jedi was Tasha Ryo, a Twi'lek female who was the niece of Hawk Ryo and the daughter of Baron Volnos Ryo. She had refused to take her place as a crime lord's heir, despite her father insistent on demanding that she take up the mantle to rule the clan.
But her mother has a powerful claim on her, or so says her dad, apparently.
She prefers not to use physical weaponry. Instead, she primarily uses
Yeah, she's the one who's throwing them hands.
hand-to-hand combat in tandem with using her abilities in the Force. She had been in the middle of saving her father from an assassination attempt when she saw this vision. The third Jedi was Seknos Wrath, a male of the Sith pure-blooded species. Seknos comes from a long line of very successful Jedi, giving him a lot to live up to. His grandparents who raised him were legendary masters, who were hard on him for his tendency towards being prideful and bold. He had been showing off his experiments with Force lightning to a group of adoring girls when he saw the vision of Zesh. This caused him to mess up and nearly kill himself using Force lightning. His boasting was interrupted by his grandparents who gave him a stern lecture about using this technique.
Look, he's just showboating for the ladies, man. All guys do it. I'm just saying. They do stupid shit because women like it.
Reminding Seknos of their species' natural inclination towards the dark side. And finally, one other would be able to perceive the Hound's astral projection. That was Dagan Locke, who was still trapped on the moon of Bogan. The three journeyers followed the Force and ended up converging on one point in the valley. At that moment, a ship crash lands right before them, and the man from their shared vision, the Hound Zesh, emerges from an escape pod. All of the beings, both Rakata and slave that had been on the ship, were now dead. His mere presence in the dark side was so potent, coupled with the deaths on the ship, that it immediately threw Tython into a violent Force storm. Zesh almost easily dispatched all three of the Jedi journeyers.
Yep, and then he's got the lightsaber that's cutting through the metal swords, weirdly enough.
His Force Saber, the archaic version of the lightsaber, sliced straight through their imbued blades, and he reversed all of their Force attacks back onto them. They were each astonished by his raw power, and they almost lost to him entirely. It was a grueling battle, but the Jedi journeyers managed to overwhelm him with their superior numbers and disarmed him of the Force Saber. Now without his weapon, Zesh fled into the abyss of Ra, a deep place on Tython filled with simmering acid pools and incredibly dangerous creatures. The three Jedi journeyers decided to chase him into that abyss, and following their trail were three superior Jedi, which included Master Quan Jang and Hawk Ryo. Within the abyss, Zesh finds himself chased by the ghosts of people that he has murdered. It turns out that he has been the one to sabotage the ship upon arrival, and that he slaughtered every being on board, including his own Predor master. However, due to his injuries, a concussion which rendered him unable to remember why he had done this, soon he found himself fighting off Tython's native fauna, those that were able to absorb his Force abilities. While Zesh managed to take down a pack of canine predators, he soon found himself facing off against a Sarl, one of Tython's giant worms, which could apparently
Hi, Aranya, how are you doing?
breathe Force lightning. Without his weapon, the Force Saber, he was practically at its mercy. This was until Shea Koda, Seknos Wrath, and Tasha Ryo arrived, distracting the worm by hurling rocks at it, saving the Force Hound's life. However, being only journeyers without weapons, they were unable to affect it. Shay, though.
Yeah, that's fair, and the one girl's not exactly throwing hands with the Alaskan bullworm.
Still had Zesh's Force Saber and didn't know how to properly activate it. This was a weapon that could only be ignited when one channeled the dark side of the Force. Because of this, Zesh convinced Shay to give him back his weapon, as only he could use it properly. Taking a chance, she threw him the saber, but as soon as he got it, he abandoned the Jedi and decided to watch.
Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder who could have thought that was gonna happen.
What they would do in the face of the threat. Being a Hound of Rakata, he only knew one thing. You take no mercy on enemies, and you cull out the weak. His entire perspective on the universe was formed around the principle of the strongest ruling. He literally knew no other way. So when he saw that the Jedi were protecting one another whenever they were put down by the worm, he was shocked. First, Tasha fell, and then Seknos. Zesh expected Shay to allow the worm to eat her companions while she ran, since that is what he would have done. But instead, he sensed her purge all fear from her body, begin to glow with a luminous light within the Force as she stepped in front of her fallen friends. Zesh was moved by her light, and jumped into the battle to fight alongside her. The superior Jedi who had been tracking them had now finally arrived. While the Rangers, Shay and Zesh, finished off the worm, Master Quan Jang melded his mind with the other masters around Tython in order to attempt to restore balance to the planet and bring an end to the storm. However, they discovered that Zesh was the epicenter of the storm, and it was feeding off of his darkness, and he was in turn feeding off of it. The Jedi attempted to get the Hound to stand down, but instead, he stood his ground against them, refusing to be defeated by an enemy until he was dead. He even manipulated the storm to strike at the Jedi with a bolt of lightning.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is yet another example of why violence is, in fact, sometimes the answer. Sure, try your best to make it the last answer. Try your best to make it the last possible thing that you could do. Try and exhaust all forms of diplomacy, but once they are exhausted, you need to have the ability for violence. You have to be able to perform what would be considered evil acts for the act of good in some cases.
Believing that her master...
I've said it and I will say it again, violence is sometimes the answer.
...could be dead because of Zesh, attacked him and took his Force Saber. Feeling enraged, she managed to activate the weapon and poised to strike down the Hound. However, Zesh was weakened by his many injuries and accepted his death.
Yeah, fuck you, Zesh.
He mentioned to her that whenever they eat his body, they should get the honor portion, his heart, because he had fought so bravely in life.
Why the... Hold on, wait a second. Does he really believe that we're gonna eat his body?
For this was
Is that something that the ancient Jedi did?
Cotton way whenever they defeated their enemy. The very odd request shook Shay out of her rage as she lowered the saber, telling
because the Rakatans are cannibals and would do that.
him that such a thing was not the Jedi way. His confusion doubling, Zesh then passed out from pain. The Jedi took him back to the Temple of Healing, Maharakash, to have his wounds patched up. This entire time, Zesh was culture shocked by the fact that they were not murdering him. In fact, he didn't even know what a healer was. Tasha Ryo would end up visiting him in his cell in order to help him recover and to maintain his lost memories. Upon accessing his mind though, she learned everything about the incoming Rakatan forces. She also learned the duty of the Force Hounds and was horrified by their service. Master Ketu and several members of the council arrived at the hospital and decided that the safest thing to do was to banish Zesh to Bogan so that he did not throw Tython out of balance again. Hawk Ryo, who had experienced being exiled himself, encouraged the Hound to spend his time meditating on Ashla so that he could find balance and return. However, Zesh mentioned that their view of the Force was much different than his, as he only knew the ways of darkness. And upon the moon of Bogan, Daganlok senses Zesh's arrival, and knew that his vision was soon coming to fruition. Part 2. A slave weapon liberated. 2 months pass after these events. The Jedi...
And again, I'm pretty sure we still have those creatures that were created by, like, the first alchemist order. They're on fucking Bogan, and I'm wondering why we're not hearing any kind of stories about Dagan Locke living alongside them on this moon.
They are studying the Force Hound's Force Saber to understand its functionality. It appears to be indestructible, unaffected by the hottest forges or the coldest coolant. The Vertep headmaster, Mad Dog, notices that it doesn't have a power switch and can't discern the purpose of the crystal. The 3 journeyers and Hawk Ryo are present for the study. Ryo, having spent time on Bogan, understands the nature of the dark side better than most. He ends up igniting it and discovers that in order to properly use the weapon, one must shift their own internal balance to channel the dark side. But maintaining the blade continues to draw one deeper into the darkness. It is a powerful, but an incredibly dangerous weapon. Master Mad Dog allows Hawk to keep the weapon so that he may experiment on it to better understand it. While this is happening, Master Ketu goes to visit Rajavari once more, enlighten him on the recent events to get his wisdom.
This is probably why there's a lot of people that think that lightsaber combat inherently, at least in the form that we know a lightsaber to be, inherently is a dark side type skill. Because assumedly, the first version of the lightsaber was only a way to channel the dark side of the Force. So, okay, all right, okay, you know what? It's all coming together. It's all sticking. I understand where Yoda went wrong. I still am not at all giving him a pass for it. He lived 900 fucking years and fucked up the whole time.
And guidance. The 2 masters have a conversation wherein Rajavari chastises his former student, not heeding the journeyer's vision the same way that the council did not heed Dagon Locke's. Ketu, though, maintains that the Jedi don't want to sound war drums over simple visions, but Rajyavari rebutes this. The glimpses of the Force must be followed at all costs. He forces Master Ketu
That's because they become pussies over the years, all right? They nuked 2 fucking cities, and now they're like, listen, we really can't be going and fighting anybody right now. We kind of have to be the peaceful guys. We have to be the peace people. Because if we're not, they're not going to like us.
Confront the truth about why
this is politics. This is the introduction of politics to the Jedi Order, and it is already hurting them.
Council was ignoring the vision, because if they were true, then everything the Jedi know would come to an end. They would have to confront the fact that they weren't the only knowledgeable Force wielders in the galaxy, and that they had needlessly sentenced Dagon Locke to a 12-year imprisonment. Master Rajyavari encourages Ketu to find out who Zesh is and what he knows. Meanwhile, the Hound and Dagon Locke had a meetup on the world of Bogan. Locke showed the newcomer how he managed to trick the guard droids by manipulating his prison cuffs. He then divulges his story, learning that Zesh was not only the figure from the vision, but that he possessed the knowledge of how to create the Force Saber, or the Sword of Fire that Dagon Locke had seen in his visions. The Dark Jedi now believed that if they could get Zesh to create a saber, then he could show it to the Masters and to prove that his vision was true. The two of them escaped Bogan, using a ship that had been down during the Despot War. Zesh charged the power cells with his Force lightning to get it back into commission, and the two departed for the planet of Krev Koer, first to find a proper crystal, and then to the world of Nox afterwards to get the construction material to create the Force Saber. Back on Tython, receiving an alert that the prisoners had escaped, a team of Jedi consisting of Shea Koda, Hawk Ryo, Seknos Wrath, and 3 other Rangers went on to investigate. After fighting...
Okay, so I'm seeing the creatures now. What are they called? Tarenta or something like that. They feed on like high force energy flesh, like specifically Jedi. Like it's odd, but all right.
Off the Tarenta on the Dark Moon and investigating the prisoners' living quarters, they found that Dagon Locke had carved images of himself holding the Force Saber into the wall. They also found evidence of the repaired ship. Hawk.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get some good crossovers with Star Wars, I would imagine. At some point, anyway, we'll probably see Buzz Lightyear fly by. You know, I don't know. We'll see. Kathleen Kennedy's not fucking in charge anymore, so we'll see.
Knowing how his old friend thinks, deduces that he's going to attempt to recreate the Force Saber, and so the team follows the 2 Dark Jedi to the world. On the glassy planet, Seknos and 2 other Rangers engage.
Phantom Menace was like one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters, and it is a key point of my childhood.
Locke and Zesh, but the battle doesn't go well for them at all. One of the Rangers succumbs to Dagon's mind twist, making her believe that she is on fire, and Dagon defeats the other 2 in sword combat. After a brief duel with Zesh, Seknos ends up sacrificing himself to save one of the other Rangers, resulting in him plummeting down a deep pit. However, he does survive his fall against all odds, and is nursed back to health by the unlikeliest of people, Trill, the Forced Hound of Skull Nas, who had been ordered to follow Zesh. On the planet Nox, Dagon, Locke, and Zesh arrive and infiltrate a manufacturing facility. Once again, Locke uses his mind tricks to subdue the owner, while Zesh crafts them both their each Force Saber. Utilizing alchemy and the crystals that they had picked up on the world, the material of the machinery found on Nox, he forges their new weapons of frozen fire. Although Zesh was always taught this was the weapon of a slave, he sees now that Dagon Locke views it as an image of power and authority. Just like himself, it is a weapon that has been freed of the shackles, given a greater destiny. A destiny that he has no idea will reshape the galaxy forever.
I mean, bro wasn't wrong with his vision, right? I'm just saying.
Now that Locke has his tool
they should have at least looked into it at some point instead of just immediately denying it from the very beginning. Like, it was just a bad dream. You know what the fuck you're talking about. Go to this dark side moon and meditate there for like 10 years or so until you start saying the shit we want to hear from you.
His vision, he believes that it will make much more to convince the Jedi to follow his path. He ominously states that it will take an army, but that Locke knows where to find one. He ends up assembling the inner circle of Queen Hadia, all of her top generals and lieutenants from the Despot War, which had been banished to the world of Nox. He convinces them all to follow him as their leader. This time, not to destroy the Jedi, but to save them from themselves and prepare for the coming dark army that he has seen in his vision. But quickly behind them is the other half of the Jedi strike team, Shea Koda, Hawk Ryo, and Rory Fenn. So the Dark Ones split and work to flee from their captors. Hawk Ryo catches up with Dagan Lok on the edge of a bridge and confronts him with Zesh's old Force Saber. The two ignite their blades and have a brief duel, making this technically the first lightsaber duel within the Jedi Order. However, it is also technically not, since it turns out that the man that Hawk is fighting is just an illusion cast within his mind, while the real Dagan escapes. Elsewhere, an enraged Shea catches up to Zesh, believing that he has killed Seknos. Although they begin to duel, Zesh is holding back, warning her to walk away as he does not wish to kill her. However, their duel is interrupted when a giant Dianoga grabs Shea and drags her into the murky depths of the lake below. Against his better judgment, Zesh dives in after her.
See, this is what I'm fucking talking about. Like, the Jedi of old are fighting dudes with lightsabers, and they've got just regular-ass sword and these hands, okay? Come on, man. They are absolutely children playing with sticks compared to the masters of old.
In order to save her life, Seknos ends up making contact with Hawk Ryo.
Okay, well, all right, what is this? Just hentai now? What's going on here? Tentacle monster?
Proving himself to be alive. Hawk, now knowing Dagan's plan, heads to his homeworld of Shikawa. A lot of the old despot sympathizers still existed there, and that would be where Zesh and Locke would try to recruit more for their army. Seknos and Trill, who had concealed her true nature in the Force in order to hide from the Jedi, met up with the rest of the Jedi and snuck into Shikawa in order to find the two Darksiders. The final showdown happens where Hawk Ryo and Dagan Locke duel for real, while Seknos and Zesh get their rematch.
Duel for real, as though they weren't dueling for real elsewise?
A rematch that the Sith pureblood still loses. As a Force Hound, Zesh is far more powerful and skilled than any Jedi journeyer. Shea Koda, who had been put in a trance by Dagan Locke, snaps out of it whenever he injures Ryo. Shea manages to convince...
at this point, it's just like a Sith apprentice versus a regular-ass Jedi Knight dude, like not even a master.
Zesh that Locke was only using him, just as the Rakata had. The Hound eventually turns against him, and Locke makes the mistake of trying to enter his mind and manipulate him like he had many others. But he quickly discovers that Zesh's mind is not a place where he wants to be. The crushing darkness of Zesh's mental scape incapacitates the Dark Jedi, ending the hunt at last.
Shit.
While this
Bro, so fucked up, he grabbed the Sith, said, "Come here and toy with my mind for a second," and the Sith went crazy.
Was occurring, Tasha Ryo had been on Tython attempting to learn about the truth of the Rakata. Soon all would be revealed when she discovered an ancient holocron, not of the origin of the Jedi. This holocron was created by the Kwa of Dathomir. From it, she learned that long ago they had harnessed the power of the Force to create what is known as the Infinity Gates, giant portals that could transport one from any point in the galaxy to another. They then used these gates to connect with other species, to teach them the ways of the Force.
What species is that? Jesus Christ! It's like a giant Cthulhu-esque monster that we've got Jedi and stormtroopers all fighting together. Well, they're not like stormtroopers, but you know what I mean.
Force, and to develop relationships with them. They did the same thing when they had stumbled upon the Rakatan homeworld of Lihan. However, what they didn't know was that the Rakata were an evil people that ate their own and only cared for domination.
What do you mean they didn't know that? What?
Power.
Bro literally said, "Okay, you've killed me. Just make sure that when you eat me, you do it in this order."
Considered them worse than the Sith. By the time that the Kwa species discovered their true nature, it was far too late, and the Rakata had used the Kwa's knowledge and gifts of technology to create Force-based ships and weapons of mass destruction. These were
another bit of technology that they found that they didn't understand at all, but understood enough to appropriate it to do the thing that they want to actually do. It was never actually designed to do this. I'm pretty sure it used to be just like a Stargate teleporting thing.
Were used purely for conquest, creating what is known as the Infinite Empire. This is the first true threat of the Jedi Order. The Rakata turned their sights on taking the Kwa's Infinity Gates to make their empire unstoppable.
Yeah.
But the Kwa fought back to the very last man before destroying many of their Infinity Gates as possible, believing that it was better that they be destroyed than fall into the hands of the Rakata. But one still existed somewhere buried, on none other than the world of Tython. And now, one of the Rakatan Predors, by the name of Skalnas, was seeking it out, hoping to use its power to reverse a strange phenomenon, one that was causing the Rakata to rapidly lose their connection to the Force. Meanwhile, Master Rajavari and Ketu learned the information from Tasha, and Ketu ordered preparations to be made for war. There was no denying it anymore. Dagon Lock's vision was now coming to pass. Part 3. Fury of the Force Saber. 1 year passes from this point. During this time, the Infinite Empire have invaded the Tythos system. They begin by attacking the outpost of the Fury's Gate, and then taking the gas giants Obri and Mar, along with their moons.
Yeah, okay, so this is the expansion of the first empire that was run by the Rakatans, who are evil, cannibalistic creatures that are literally just have been evil since the beginning of time. They were one of, like, the first 5 races of beings that were created, and they were evil from the beginning.
They continued their march across the system, but met a strong defense on Tython itself, as the Jedi repelled their initial attack and forced them to fall back to Ska-Gora. Every world that the Rakata attacked, they either enslaved the population or left it in utter ruin. At last, the Jedi decided to use Zesh's...
Also, this is just straight out of War of the Worlds, right? Like, I'm not the only one noticing this. Like, this is just straight out of War of the Worlds.
...knowledge and mass-produced the Force Saber on a huge level, giving it to the whole of the Order. This was the only weapon to prevail against the Rakata before. They had to accept the risk of channeling the dark side, or die. Not only this, but they made a deal with Dagon Locke to have him once more lead the armies of the Jedi. It took time for them...
Alright, Dagon, we'll give you your sword back, but on one condition.
...to get used to the new weapon, as they functioned and handled much different than their metal swords did. But Zesh taught them how to wield it properly. In a shocking turn, Master Rajavari comes out of exile and resumes his title as the General, heading the combined forces of the...
Damn, he pushed this dude into a tree that has a giant spike on it, and it just impaled him with the Force. Like, my God.
Jedi and the armies of the remaining settled
the Jedi old aren't gonna put someone to his knees, cut his hands off, and then go, okay, you will stand trial. No. Trial by combat, and you lost, pussy.
...worlds under the Rakatan control. But the secret weapon helping the Jedi out most was the use of what is known as seers. Those that use clairvoyance and interpret dreams and visions to the divine in order to learn where their enemy would strike next. Tasha Ryo, who had now been promoted to a Jedi Ranger, along with the other Journeyer friends, happens to be one of these seers. While the Rakata was having a great deal of trouble attacking Tython directly, they decided to take a new approach, sending their first wave of attackers known as the Flesh Raiders to the world of Shikawa. The Flesh Raiders were brutish, mutated specimens of their own species, bred purely for war. The Jedi meet them in the battle, wearing their newly crafted imbued armor and riding upon their Rancor dragons. Zesh now fights on their side and must face down many of the Force Hounds that he has betrayed, but they are hardly a challenge for him. Zesh was always the most skilled of the Hounds, but little does he know that even though he is an ally of the Jedi now, his memory loss was more than just a concussion. It is revealed by the Predor that they used the Force to turn him into a sleeper agent without him even knowing it, and that this has been the reason for his betrayal of the Rakata, the reason that he had crashed the ship in the first place.
Oh, damn! Okay, alright, so we're gonna get a 25,000 year pre-Anakin then, where he was sent into the Jedi Order, and then once he's become an incredibly integral figure, central to their defense or offense because of how powerful he is, they're going to activate him by saying the secret phrase, and he's going to start killing all the Jedi around him. Oh, damn. Look, say what you want about the Rakata. They're evil, but they're smart as fuck.
Did not even remember his old rival in the Force Hounds, Trill, who was now an undercover agent among the Tythons and the Jedi. The Jedi fought ruthlessly in this engagement. The Flesh Raiders do not understand the concept of surrender, and they would fight till they were all dead. So the Jedi gave up on the tenets of mercy on their enemy. They fight on, losing...
They gave up on mercy. Fuck it. Kill them all.
The balance that
no mercy. No rest for the wicked.
It's so carefully cultivated until this moment. The requirement of the Force Sabers even drawing them deeper into the darkness, until finally they won the battle, and they drove the Rakata off of Shikawa. The Sith pureblood Seknos despises the Force Saber. The war they now fight is nothing like the one of glory and honor that his ancestors had fought in. He feels himself and his allies being pushed off the brink of balance, and this concept disgusts him. but he also knows that there is nothing to be done.
Oh,
not
damn.
until the
Oh, he's gonna kill the one. Okay, he's gonna kill the one.
are completely finished. The
apprentice.
Jedi formulate a plan to strike at the heart of the Infinite Empire, directly at the heart of the Praetor Skal Nas himself. Once again, using the astral projection ability, Zesh manages to locate their hidden base on Skagora, and the Jedi prepare for attack. Despite the Jedi attempting to strike, Trill had been keeping Skal Nas updated on their movements, and the Rakata laid a trap on their world. One that succeeded in capturing the Jedi forces, including Dagan Lok and Seknos. The Rakata placed them within the battery cells of their ship, drawing upon the pain and hatred of each captured being to provide power to their machines. Zesh and Trill attempted to mount a rescue mission inside of the base, but Trill reveals herself as a traitor and stops Zesh, attacking him when his back was turned, incapacitating him. The other Jedi continued to battle the Flesh Raider army on the surface of Skagora, further scarring the once untouched beauty of the world and sinking themselves deeper in the dark side. Here something tragic begins to take hold. The Jedi begin to enjoy killing their enemy, and go out of their way to seek more death upon their foes, following the Force Sabers.
They're falling to the dark side, the whole damn Jedi Order.
Temptation and the whispers of the dark side, while being held captive by the Rakata. Praetor.
They need more and more power.
Skal Nas tortures Zesh until he gains his memory back and remembers that he was a plant all along. The former Hound is horrified at the realization that all of his friends, and even the relationship that he has forged with Shay, it is all a lie. Zesh had been a traitor himself, with the purpose of learning the secrets of the Jedi, divulging their weaknesses to Skal Nas, all for the purpose of the Rakata being able to exploit them, to use them as slaves. Now once again a Force Hound for the Infinite Empire, Zesh divulges that the Jedi are using seers to predict their movements, and under the Praetor's orders, he tortures Dagan Lok with his own Mind Twist ability, extracting the truth of his vision from long ago. The reason the Chasm of Tython interferes with the minds of the Jedi is revealed, because at the very bottom is the location of the Qua Infinity Gate. Zesh also projects himself through the Force again, and blinds the sight of all of the seers, and by blinding them, he both burned their physical eyes out, and cut them off from the Force entirely. Luckily though, before their sight was burned out completely, Tasha Ryo was granted one final vision. The vision saw that the Rakata would attack the Temple of Anil Kesh, which lay over the chasm. As the Jedi learned that Zesh was now a traitor, they recalled what remained of their forces back to Tython.
No, damn it, now they're going after my temple, the science one. You leave my chasm alone.
To prepare for the inevitable invasion of the Rakata. The Rakata did indeed come, and ventured to the Jedi home planet. The fight begins both in orbit and in the atmosphere, as well as on the ground. Force sabers clash, teeth gnash, and both sides are filled with a lust for blood. The Jedi have now wholly given themselves over to the dark side. There is no longer a balance. Their minds are consumed with hatred. All they feel is the desire to shed the blood of their enemy. Tython reacts in turn, violently, unleashing its storms and earthquakes, but it does nothing to quell the savage fighting. The world itself begins to be torn asunder. The Jedi unleash all of their alchemical monsters from the pens of Anil Kesh, sending them to the Rakata hordes in order to feast. On the Rakatan capital ship, Seknos fully gives into his hatred and frees himself, as well as the slaves from their battery.
The first Sith pureblood finally gives into his hatred. We've created a Sith for the first time ever.
Cells. The Sith pureblood, filled with a rage that he has never felt before. Consumed by darkness entirely, the same darkness that he has avoided for so long, the Sith pureblood leads a slave revolt and works to rejoin the battle on Tython. The Force itself begins to cry out in pain and desperation. Zesh and Skal Nash pull Dagan Lok along with the chains into the chasm so that they can find the Infinity Gate. Using ancient Rakatan knowledge, the Praetor is able to bypass the wall that causes all Force sensitives to lose their minds. He leaves Dagan Lok for dead there, while he and the Hound venture inside. Shay Koda then arrives just in time to see Dagan Lok having freed himself from his chains and fighting off a horde of Flesh Raiders with 2 stolen Force Sabers. The Jedi refuses to fall. Shay and Dagan both plunge into the chasm in order to stop the Rakatan Overlord's grand plan and to put an end to Zesh. On the surface of the world, Seknos faces down Trill and defeats her in combat. The Sith is about to unleash a massive wave of Force lightning that would surely incinerate her as his—
Wait, which one? Because, like, she's a Sith, but, like, also so is he.
eyes begin to turn a
Because he's from a race of beings literally known as the Sith. Not necessarily that he's like a dark side Sith or anything.
burning yellow. However, Master Quan Jang shouts this Seknos to remember who he is, that he is greater than his fury and his darkness, that he is a Jedi. Pulling himself out of the depths of darkness, the Sith pureblood conquers his people's penchant for Bogan and fires his force lightning straight into the sky with a howl of rage, sparing the life of the Force Hound Trill. By his actions, he proves that the Sith people are capable of overcoming their nature when they care enough about the good inside of them, to listen to the Ashla, the light. This was the way of balance that the Jedi had maintained for so long successfully, but now, as with Tython, the balance was being quickly destroyed. Now deep within the chasm, Dagan, Locke, and Shay arrive to face down Zesh and the Predor Skal Nas. Dagan duels the Rakatan Overlord, but decides to use his signature Mind Twist ability, attacking him in his mindscape. But just like Zesh, he discovers that entering a Rakatan's mind was a place of true savagery and darkness. He was accosted by screams of all of the beings that the Predor had eaten.
I would imagine these people eat their like friends and family. Like, come on, what are we talking about?
The Rakatan takes this opportunity.
Look at that face. Is that the face of somebody that's sane? Is that the face of somebody that you look at and go, that's definitely the protagonist right there?
Opportunity to stab Locke before activating the Infinity Gate and basking in the pathway to the universe. Ultimate power. Meanwhile, Shay duels the man that had become her lover, and she does everything she can to remind Zesh of the truth. Despite what the Rakata had done to his mind, she knew that he knew the truth. He had come to know love, and he had tasted the light. He no longer had to be a slave, but Zesh could choose to be a free man.
He no longer had to be a slave, but he's gonna be.
Zesh was reminded of all of this, all of the death that he had once brought. He was filled with pain, sadness, regret. He did not believe himself to be the man that Shay did. But his world was destroyed once again when Coda lowered her weapon and said that she had forgiven him. In that moment, Skal Nas blasted her in the back with force lightning and screamed at Zesh that love was a lie, that there was nothing in the
Damn it, he killed her!
universe but power, and that he was a slave.
That's why we don't need women on the battlefield, am I right? I'm just saying. They need to be willing to perform some violent acts, okay? Not everything can be solved with understanding and compliance.
This causes the Hound to fly into a dark fury, to rebel against his Rakatan overlords, once and for all. On the surface, Tasha Ryo hasn't given up trying to restore balance to Tython despite being blinded by the Force. The gatekeeper of the Qua Holocron informs her of a failsafe that has been employed should the Rakata ever find the
Damn, okay, I don't know what's happening to her, but it's a lot.
Infinity Gate again. But the process required the use of the Tho Yor and the sacrifice of a Jedi seer. Although
Oh, and so now she's blinded. The girl that was literally only hand-to-hand combat for her entire Jedi career is okay, yeah, sure. You know, that's fine. It probably won't even affect her really all that much.
she was blinded to the Force, the Holocron
I see
gatekeeper
no reason why she can't stomp around Toph style and just see through the vibrations everywhere.
informed Tasha that blinded did not mean severed. And
Yeah, and she's already a Jedi, so she can see through the Force. Like, there's a bunch of people that have done that.
the Force still flowed through her. However, this process would cost her her life. Going into a meditative state, Tasha Ryo accepted her destiny and was opened up to the Force once more. Her very essence was transferred into the Tho Yor, which floated above the temple of Anil Kesh. In her final moments, her sight was restored and she was able to perceive exactly who had created the Tho Yor and why they had done so. The ancient ship then glowed with a bright beacon of energy and shot a beam down into the chasm to permanently close the Infinity Gate. At the gate, Zesh and Skal Nas had been in a fierce duel. The distraction caused by the closure of the portal distracted the Predor well enough for Zesh to strike a decisive blow, cutting him across the midsection, ending the Overlord's life. Luckily for him, Shay Coda was not dead, and apparently neither was Dagan Locke. The three of them all managed to escape the depths of the chasm before the Infinity Gate detonated permanently, thus ending this section of the lore. And now we reach Chapter 5, the birth of the Jedi.
Finally done with Chapter 4, Parts 1 and 2.
The victory was short-lived. In the aftermath
the birth of the Jedi. This is the separate order that exists outside of the Jedi, right? Like,
Kata's defeat.
This is when they start embracing solely the light side, I would imagine.
They lost their only hope to saving their species from being cut off to the Force. It wasn't too long after this that the Infinite Empire began to disintegrate everywhere in the rest of the galaxy. Sentient life on various planets took old Rakatan technology and reverse engineered it to invent the first hyperdrives and to achieve hyperspace travel. Shea Koda and the former Force Hound Zesh, who now goes by the name of Tau, got a happy ending in the end. He would join the Jedi and go on his own journey across Tython, learning more about Ashla and connecting to the light. Meanwhile, the Council all agreed to lay aside their Force sabers as they saw what it had done to the members of their ranks. They had all felt the distinct shift to the dark side and were able to come back from the brink of it. The weapon skewed the balance far too much, but the one person who didn't agree was Dagan Locke. Dagan mentioned that the Flesh Raiders were still left on Tython and that the Rakata could come back in the future. He refused to put down his Force saber or be returned to the moon of Bogan, and he went off to train his own following, which consisted of the all-liberated slaves from the Rakatan ship, those that refused to abandon the dark side. Breaking from the cast for a moment.
Okay, so he decided to go and start training the dark side of the fucking Force. Okay, so this is where the Jedi and the Sith really started to separate themselves from the original order, which was all about literally everything about them was about balance.
We now jump to a different story happening.
But I guess because of that, they wouldn't stop Dagan Locke from going out and starting his own dark side school, because in the pursuit of balance, they'd be fine with it, and ultimately it's probably what leads to a lot of them dying.
In the same year, surrounding a different Jedi Ranger. The Ranger's name is Lenori Brock. He had actually been away from Tython for quite a long time, as she was one of those Rangers that rarely visited the homeworld, and she had not participated in the system-wide Rakatan War. In the wake of the Swarms of Darkness, though, a new cult had arisen somewhere.
This is what I'm talking about. She got like a samurai sword and a fucking pistol on her hip, dude. Who is this?
In the Tythos system, with a brand new leader that opposed the Jedi way. The Master Council recalled Brock back to—
She really looks like, what's her name from Attack on Titan? Like, Misaka or something like that, right? Like Aaron's sister, essentially. Like, who, I don't know who that's what she looks like, for real. Like, she looks like she's from Attack on Titan.
Tython, and entrusted her with this mission, because the cult leader was her own brother. Dalian Brock had been born without the talent of the Force, unlike his parents and his sister. He had failed his Jedi trials and had grew disillusioned. Feeling as an outcast, thought to be dead, he now emerged many years later with a radical departure from the Jedi's teachings. He is now obsessed with traveling beyond the reaches of known space, bent on opening a hyperspace rift using dark matter as the key. This risked a cataclysmic reaction that would consume the entire system. Lenori would go on a journey throughout the Tythos system to learn her brother's plan and to stop his mad machinations. All the while, she was dealing with the fact that she had thought that he was dead, but now having to bring an end to him herself. The Jedi discovers that his plan is to tear open a gate into hyperspace at the cost of Tython itself. It was both a way to leave the system and to get revenge on the people that he had felt had abandoned him. Lenori accepted that her brother had totally lost his mind now and faced no other choice. She took his life to stop the impending disaster. Unfortunately, just like all other Jedi, she would find no rest when she returned to Tython. What awaited her was the after effects of the invasion. The stink of the dark side reeked on Tython's surface, and her own balance was disrupted by the killing of her own brother.
Don't do that, it'll start to rain.
Blood, and it would continue to be disrupted in the coming era. The Dark Times had now only—
Dude, they look so much more badass with just regular ass swords, dude.
Just begun. While both the Despot Wars and the invasion of Tythos had only lasted a single year each, they were wars which had left terrible lasting effects on the Jedi, and they were about to plunge headfirst into a war which would drag out for the next 10 years. Something far worse. Unlike the previous two wars, not much is recorded about the time known as the Force Wars, but it was instigated by the followers of Dagan Locke, our once hero who returned to take over the ways of the Jedi, and to run things his new, enlightened, darker way. Now having found themselves entirely devoted to the dark side, they called themselves the Bogan Jedi, in an effort to
Bogan Jedi, the Dark Jedi. It's what their original name was.
Maintain balance. The remaining members of the Order had to throw themselves deeply into the light, becoming the Ashla Jedi. They wielded upgraded versions of
the Dark Jedi and the Light Jedi. What was originally the Jedi, which was an order of people that were solely focused on obtaining and maintaining balance in the Force, has now split to the Dark Jedi and the Light Jedi, the Ashla Jedi and the Bogan Jedi.
Force-imbued sword, one that could at least contend with Force sabers of the Bogan, though the history is a bit muddled as to the art that they displayed both using the size of regular swords as well as the Force sabers, so the timeline of weapon progression is a bit unclear in the lore here. Our best theory is the knowledge of how to actually create the Force sabers was known to Zesh alone, as well as to the Vertep headmaster Mad Dog, both of whom had sided with the Ashla Jedi, and as a result, the Force sabers of the Bogan Jedi were limited to what could be scavenged in the aftermath, what they could find that the Rakata had left behind. This led some to be able to use them, and others being forced to use old bladed weapons. But interestingly, at some point, a brilliant Jedi weapons master whose name has now been lost to history unfortunately, managed to construct the first lightsaber. Aptly, it was called the First Blade. While it was a type of proto-saber, it had an internal power cell and did not require the use of the dark side.
See, this is from Star Wars The Old Republic, the video game, because you have to literally build this motherfucking lightsaber on type.
Activate. This was the basis by which all future lightsabers would be constructed, and it was tens of millennia ahead of its time. However, feeling the implications of the weapon, the master hid it away.
Oh, this is when they've got a battery pack. See, so we can make lightsabers, I think, unless it's all AI that I've seen. We can make lightsabers nowadays, but we have to have this big-ass battery pack with us, so it's nice to see that even they had to do the same thing.
Only to be found by one that was worthy. During the Force Wars, the Ashla Jedi fell almost entirely to the light, where they forgot the balance that had once defined their very way of life. Seeing light as the only way to counterbalance the dark, they reorganized themselves into the Holy Order of the Jedi Knights, officially becoming Jedi. Master Rajavari, Garen Jard, Master Ketu, and several others would become together to form a new kind of council which would govern over the Jedi Order. Their main goal, defend against the dark side. This would become the very first High Council. At some point, Dagan Lok would be slain in battle, leaving a few of his followers behind, as it seemed like peace was once again well within grasp. But there was another. Rajavari had been growing even closer to the dark side than his fellow Jedi. He despised that the Jedi had fallen purely to the light, and he believed that the Order needed to be completely remade, overhauled from the ground up. But first, it needed to be obliterated. He would lead a section of Jedi students into the dark side, and establish a set key of principles for his students to live by, all of which ran contrary to the Jedi's established virtues. While we don't know each of them in order, we do know of their second principle: all life is a battle, even to the last breath. And the seventh principle, to sacrifice strength, is the act of a fool. Both of these seem to be projects of Rajavari's trauma from the previous wars. The second principle shows the extremist survival mentality, and the seventh principle shows how he has rejected the Jedi way of self-sacrifice, after seeing how many of the Jedi had died doing so.
Well, listen, I don't necessarily blame him, because so not only was he taught that the best way to be a Jedi is to actively seek balance in the Force, but throughout all of his life experiences, he's been shown that the best way is to seek balance in the Force. And so, honestly, I would be with him in that I also disagree with the Jedi splitting into an Ashla and a Bogan forms of its original temple. So I'm honestly, I'm with him here. I serve the Force. I don't serve Ashla. I don't serve Bogan. I don't serve the light or the dark side. I serve the Force. If the Force calls me to be diplomatic, I will. And if it calls me to be the other thing, I'll do that too.
However, it was the fifth principle which remains the most controversial. Mercy creates a spiral of destruction. He witnessed this take place during the war with the Rakata and with Dagan Lok, and how he had continued to cause problems despite all of his chances. And so the Force Wars continued, with the once war hero, founder of the Jedi Council Rajavari, helming the dark side forces. During this period of time, they would establish the Fount of Rajavari, a place where he stored all of his most precious and dangerous knowledge. It was a safe house of his principles and guidance to be inherited by a worthy heir. He would seek out the First Blade and claim it for himself to use during the war. He also inscribed the location of the font of Rajaviri into the hilt, so that a worthy seeker would one day find it and be led to enlightenment. But the day would come when Rajaviri and his Dark Jedi would meet their end. After nearly a decade of fighting amongst themselves, the Force Wars would come to a close in 25,783 BBY.
Damn right, we've won again.
Rajaviri and his students would follow the second principle, fight until the very last breath. Their final stand would come when they were held up in the Temple of Calith, making it their final fortress. The now Jedi Order laid siege to the fortress for a long period of time, until Rajaviri finally fell in battle. His students all refused to surrender even after their master had fallen, deciding to adhere to his principles even till death, and his students were picked off one by the Jedi, refusing to submit. This, however, would not be the end to the story of Master Rajaviri, as he was so powerful that he had learned to keep himself from joining with the Force permanently. He had become a Force ghost of sorts, and his spirit lingered in the hidden font of Rajaviri.
So him being a Force ghost, this is, okay, so this is just his willpower alone. This isn't like a hologram of him. This isn't coming from like a holocron or anything. Like, oh, shit. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Awaiting the
like
day.
I knew that Revan willed himself back to life, but I didn't realize you could just will yourself to not pass on.
That a worthy disciple would arrive and become the heir to his knowledge. By the end of this terrible war, the planet Tython had had enough. The storms never ceased because of the hideous imbalance caused by the Jedi and the Dark Jedi. Soon the inhabitants of Tython would wish that lightning and earthquakes were the least of their worries. Soon, a terrible cataclysm occurred which practically tore the planet apart, obliterating its biosphere and making the world officially uninhabitable.
I mean, yeah, that's what happens whenever there's such a divide in the Force energy on the planet. That's what happens when you are not in balance with yourself in the Force. The planet actively attacks those that are not in balance, and now that the planet is not balanced, it must attack itself.
What few Jedi survived these events were forced to flee from the ancestral homeworld. No one in the Tythos system seemed to want to be there anyway, so it wasn't like they could go out and do anything with the planets that they had spent so long defending. They were exiles. And so, with their new hyperdrive technology, the Jedi departed the deep core and left for the rim of the galaxy, thus ending an incredibly tragic period of time. Chapter 6.
Yeah, if only they had known that the war between the light and the dark side of the Force had been fought already, like many thousands of years prior to this, then it probably would never have happened. But they didn't.
Guardians of the Republic. The Jedi Order would wander listless, attempting to find somewhere to call home. And during that time, balance in the Force would leave them entirely.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they were part of the Republic for like 25,000 years before Yoda took... Okay, shit, all right.
But you see, it wasn't out of arrogance or negligence that they did this, as the later writers of the Sith would have you believe. The dark side had taken everything from the Jedi. Emotions such as anger and hatred drove them to make innocents suffer. They had manipulated life to create horrible monsters that should have never existed. And they had bombed innocent cities for the purposes of war. The Rakata showed how the dark side made one hungry for conquest, for blood, for power. The Force Sabers had drawn them even closer to the darkness, compromising their values. And the dark side had made one of their greatest members believe that survival of the fittest was the only way that the Jedi would thrive and continue. The Jedi was not just a religion or an...
Yeah, because for whatever reason, the working together in balance and harmony with the Force just didn't work at all for the last 1,000 years.
Order. It had been a family.
10,000, honestly.
They were Tythons, bonded by a familial kinship in the Force with the ancestry that ran deep into the Order. But the dark side had taken that from them. They left Tython with their hands stained red from the blood of their family, those that they had to slaughter because of the curse of the dark side. And now, Tython was in ruins. The place that the Thoyor had brought them all together. The place that they had fought tooth and nail to defend. The only place they ever called home. In this day of heartbreak, the idea of balance, or any semblance of compromise with the dark, with the Bogan, was a cruel joke to the grieving Jedi Order. But no longer. They would serve the peaceful, life-giving Ashla, devote themselves entirely to the service of defending life, being a shield of the innocent. With this decision came the new code and the new meaning. There is no emotion, there is peace. This principle guides all meditations and interactions with others.
This is about where they fucked up, too, because, like, you could argue that Anakin would never have fallen to the dark side had they allowed him to actually be in an open relationship with Padme, right? Like, you could argue that Anakin would never have fallen to the dark side if they allowed his mother to come with him to the Jedi Temple. Like, dude was scared, and it's what drove him to being so afraid of loss that he ends up becoming Darth Vader.
It reaffirms the Jedi ideal to act without recklessness, and to view the actions of others through the pure lens of the unifying force. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. Those who don't understand this precept are quick to fear, as ignorance leads to fear, which leads to the dark side. There is no passion, there is serenity. A subtle extension of the first precept. This reminder to act dispassionately in every deliberation extends to personal obsessions, and is a reminder not to elevate the self above the mission and the order. There is no chaos, there is harmony. Those who cannot see the threads of the Force unifying all life together in existence.
You know, it is ironic that they had that, right? Do not elevate thyself above the mission and the order. Despite the fact that all of them literally did exactly that, right? You let your own preconceptions of the Force, you let your own biases for the light or the dark, allow, like, you let that happen, and you let it force you to choose which one you want to be, instead of actually allowing the Force to be the balance that it is, and instead of keeping the order together in a way that would make some sort of fucking sense. All right, so it is ironic that you're telling people not to succumb to their emotions and not to put yourself over the order, when literally all of the quote-unquote masters in the first council did exactly that.
As random and without purpose. But the Jedi are different. The Jedi perceive the structure, the will of the galaxy in a beautiful tapestry. There is no death, there is the Force. All things die, but the Force lives on. The Jedi believe that as beings who exist as shades of the Force, the end of existence is not to be overly mourned. They understand that they are a part of an energy larger than themselves. They play roles in a cosmic fabric that is greater than one's understanding. This is the code, as explained by the Jedi. For 730 years, the Jedi sailed among the stars. The stories and emotions of Tython faded to the annals of history, and it wasn't until the year 25,053 that they would come upon a new world in wild space. A world much like Tython, rich in the Force, only lacking its fierce storms. Originally, the world was known as Idux, when it was under the control of Zim the Despot. But when it welcomed the Jedi with open arms, they would call the world Ossus. The Jedi would bring over many traditions from Tython, establishing a forge to continue making their weapons, their metal blades. They had lost the first blade on Tython, but they still remembered the strange sabers of old and from myth. From that day on, they would work towards recreating the frozen laser technology, eventually bringing into being the lightsaber. But this would not happen for many thousands of years. For now, their trusty swords remained with them, a reminder of
That's fair. I mean, they did go to a desert. They basically reset their civilization back to zero.
Origins. On Ossus, they established an academy for the Jedi and made the centerpiece of the planet a great, beautiful library. They kept all the knowledge they had rescued from Tython there, and luckily, they had not lost anything in the move. They continued to collect information from the galaxy around them, filling this great library to the brim and making it the greatest source of knowledge in the entire ancient galaxy. Soon, they would even make contact with other worlds around them.
Veritable Temple of Babel, fuck yeah.
Including the planet of Kamas. The world was home to the Kamasi species, who were known for their friendship and hospitality.
What the hell kind of creature? Okay, alright.
In fact, they were so
They better be known for their friendship and hospitality, because they have nothing else going for them at all.
Known for being agreeable, that the world of Kamasi came to mean friend from afar, or stranger to be trusted in various languages. They were renowned for their skills in diplomacy and meditation, able to use wisdom and social acumen to settle disputes between powerful systems. The Jedi, not wishing to recreate the mistakes of the Tytho system, learned diplomacy and morality at the feet of the Kamasi, and thus, legend has it that it was here that the Jedi became the legendary diplomats that would use their words before their weapon. But now, across the galaxy in the core worlds that we know, the unification wars were raging on. Surprisingly, little is known about this war, except for the warlord known as Zachrinand Minus, who is generally painted as the
Zachrinand Minus. Okay.
villain. The Jedi took notice of Minus's villainy and decided to take part in the war, deeming his ways to be evil and wrong. This is important because this is one of their first interactions with the core worlds. Following these wars, several planets such as Coruscant, Corellia, Alderaan, and Duro would all come together to form what is known as the Galactic Republic. In this year, all the founders signed
Okay, so Alderaan was like a founding member then.
in the
That's
Galactic
interesting.
Constitution. But despite their aid in the war, the Jedi were still somewhat wary of interacting with any established governments and worlds, considering how the Tythos system had utterly turned on them. And so,
I don't think they ever should have been able to work with them. I don't think that they should ever have allowed that to happen, because that is directly what caused their corruption and the downfall of the Jedi Order.
the Jedi kept their distance from the Republic. The
They were
people
very nearly extinct. It was down to exactly one Jedi.
of the Republic paid little attention to the Jedi way, just seeing them as a large sect of mystics and ancient wizards. But finally, in the year 24,953 BBY, there was a period of great expansion and exploration. Duro scouts had found a new trade route and a hyperspace lane linking Coruscant directly to Ossus. When they landed on Ossus, they would come into contact with the Jedi Order officially and would meet with the Grand Master at the time by the name of Han Tyre. Tyre spent much time with the representatives of the Republic, saw how promising the future of this new system actually was, as it had the potential to bring peace to the galaxy, and thrust it into an age of progression and unity. Tyre eagerly returned to the world of Ossus, and with his arrival, there was followed by several weeks of debate, meditation among the rest of the Jedi. Some members of the Council were against joining the Republic, others were for it. It was around this time that there was also some trouble brewing between the Tyon cluster and that of the Hutt Empire. Trouble that was aimed right at the fledgling Republic. Since Ossus happened to be poised right between the two of them, it was the perfect line of defense. At this point, the Jedi Order would officially choose to join the Republic, not to be a part of the government, but to serve as the silent but their watchful guardians. It was a task that they would soon prove themselves in, with the coming of the Tyrannese War. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. And with that, the dawn of the Jedi. When the Thoyor brought them all together, they were merely beings that wanted answers concerning the life-giving energy that they could all feel around them. They begat an entire culture of those students, those that sought the
No, I didn't fall asleep.
balance between the light and the dark, guided by a living planet and 2 moons, all of which teaching them this concept. They began as simple scholars, monks, but quickly found their permanent role as guides, protectors in a small region
No,
of
I'm just trying my best to follow along, because they're throwing a lot of crazy names and lore at me.
space. But years upon years of war, devastation, and corruption
yeah.
both within and outside caused them to abandon the way of balance out of fear, agony for what the dark side had created, what it had done to them. Never wishing the destruction and pain upon anyone else, the Jedi Order dedicated themselves to ensuring that the rest of the galaxy could grow in peace, now under the watchful banner of the Republic.
Yeah, and now they're a fucking police force for the universe, and that ended super well for them.
The Jedi were not perfect. Just like any being, force sensitive or not, they were deeply flawed. But that's what I think makes
Yeah, and then they were never taught to control their emotions and balance themselves within the Force.
them deeply interesting. But whether in balance or adhering to the light, the Jedi only ever wanted to protect the sanctity of life, even when that cost came at their own and reached to their homes, friends, and even their happiness. But this is the beginning of a long history of service, of sacrifice to the Republic, and to the will of the Force, the light of the Jedi. It was the beginning of stories of heroes of bravery, such as Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, Kyle Katarn, Mara Jade, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Grandmaster Yoda, and many, many more. It is the beginning of a story that will live forever. It was the awakening of the light. It was the dawn of the Jedi. And with that, thank you so much for watching today's video.
Hell yeah! So what I learned from this is that the Jedi of old are much more powerful than the, current Jedi Order, or at least the Jedi Order that is from the original 6 movies. And again, I don't know who said it, but somebody in the series at some point said that the masters of today are but children playing with sticks and compared to the masters of old. And honestly, I completely agree with that 100%. Everything that I have seen here has justified that to me in every way. You could give an actual stick to a master of old and they would beat the holy hell out of a regular Jedi master. Anyway, thank you so much for watching.